be conservative of other people, other cultures. If you want to do business with them, be respectful in that way, but without overthinking and you know uh, thinking that it's too costly. Like can be done. Start small.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're watching from. My name is Matt Pierce, host of Visual Lounge. And today we are going to be talking about something I think that's really important. It's thinking about your audience. And when you think about your audience, you think about, well, you probably who they are, what they do, what they like, why you're talking to them. But one thing that's really interesting is your audience could be anywhere. And do they speak the same language as you? And if they don't, how do you connect with them? So we're just going to talk a little bit about that, about breaking that language barrier down a little bit from someone who is, I think, more expert than he'll probably tell you. If I say he's an expert, he'll say, well, I'm not really an expert, but he knows a thing or two. So let me go ahead and introduce our guest today. Roberto Aiello combines over 2 decades of design expertise with flair for nurturing talent, making significant contributions from Italy to Dublin's tech-savvy offices. His work spans instructional design, multimedia, graphic design, and leadership roles, notably at Zendesk and now at Personio. Beyond professional achievements, Roberto mentors globally, sharing insights and supporting aspiring designers. His holistic approach to design and learning is evident in his diverse interests, which include branding design, typography, exploring cultures. Roberto showcases a career driven by passion, creativity, and continuous quest for growth, and I'm so grateful to have him here. Please welcome Roberto to the Visual Lounge. Hey, Roberto.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And it's so great to have you. And we're going to dive into the language stuff. A lot of questions there. I think that you can speak from an expertise standpoint. But before we do that, our first question we'd like to ask people, what's one tip you can give our audience about using video in the workplace? Any thoughts?
Name your layers. No, I mean, how many times we heard that? And yeah, not many people does that. But seriously, I think one tip for improving images and videos in your work is to keep things simple. Since you mentioned videos, for videos, especially in product demos, which is something I'm familiar with, I simplify my script to keep the content relevant for a longer period. So instead of being overly prescriptive about where to click, I let the video show the action. So this way, I just extend the shelf life of the video, and who works in SaaS industry knows what I refer to.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And great advice. And so, Roberto, I want to jump into a little this language conversation. And I think we should note that for our listeners, that you are not a native English speaker. So just real quick, what's your background? And
I guess you can tell from my accent.
I can a little bit, but let's set that up so that way that gives some context for, like, as we have this conversation, this is where some of your expertise comes from.
Yeah, I'm Italian. So as you mentioned in the introduction, I come from Italy. I decided to move when I was 32 years old to Dublin in Ireland, and I'm there since then. So I'm working with multinational tech companies. I had to immerse myself into speaking English every day, working with Americans, working with people from pretty much, like, I would say more than 26 countries around the world. So that helped me not to understand that, I've always been aware of diversity, but also like getting into the nuances of different languages, different cultures that helped me over time learn how to communicate better with other people.
Yeah, and I think it's a good foundation, because where I want to go with this conversation to start is, like, obviously when you're working in multinational organizations, or even as we just kind of think of the shrinking of the globe, like you said, 26 different countries, multiple languages, and then, kind of the understanding is it's so critical for a lot of those operations. So when we talk about, like, when you do this work and you've worked for a lot of these groups, is localizing content, is that really just straight translation, or should organizations or individuals be thinking about, like, other things than just like word for word translation? Because often I think that's what happens is I want to say the word green, and it's, this word in Spanish, this word in French, this word in German, this word in, and it's just kind of, maybe that's an easy translation, but other things that are more complex and there's nuances there. So what would you suggest for people, and how should we be approaching like localization for videos or documentation or training or whatever it might be?
Yeah, definitely. Localization, it's much more than translation. You said it right. Sometimes we just have a simple conversation, or we have a simple message to deliver, and translation word by word, it's enough. But when we are looking at bigger projects, like online academies, with videos, complex videos, or trying even to deliver simple messages, localization is what we should aspire to do. And when we say localizing content means really adapting it to meet the cultural and linguistic preferences of a specific audience. So it's more than just translating words. It's about making the content feel native, right? And yeah, I can tell it because as an Italian moved to Ireland, I've seen firsthand how localization works and sometimes doesn't. So, for example, since we are talking about video, so let's talk about video, movie industry or film industry,
Yeah.
or even just TV shows. Like in Italy, all international productions, many people may not be aware about these, in Italy are traditionally dubbed. So things are changing now. Of course, people can watch movies in original language on the different platforms, or even in some cinemas. But the dubbing industry remains significant. And I always take The Simpsons as a great example of a heavy localization. So, as you may know or not know, in Italy we have many dialects. Like it's it's even more than regional. Like sometimes we are going even lower at deeper level than regional. And some main characters in the Simpsons, they speak with accents from various Italian regions. So the priest, for example, has a strong accent from a city near mine in southern Italy, and the cop speaks with a Neapolitan accent, reinforcing certain character traits and connecting better with the Italian audience. Um, and then in some cases, we also get odd situations. So I grew up listening to Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Sylvester Stallone, all with the same voice because they were dubbed by the same actor, which was Ferruccio Mendola. Um, and then, this is even getting uh, more odd because when Ferruccio Mendola, the actor dubbing these people, passed away, then suddenly I heard this actor speaking with a different voice, which was was weird enough.
I love those examples because it just, I mean, one, I think we can all relate to television movies, right? And but the difference is that conveyed through even the tone or the accent is really impressive thoughtfulness. And of course, Simpsons or Hollywood, they have budgets, they can do a lot of this. So I'm
Yeah,
curious, especially as people are trying to maybe do more of this. And I think obviously large multinational companies are kind of aware of the need. And I think they still struggle. We see, we talk to customers who are like, oh gosh, this is hard. So let's say someone's trying to start doing this and they want to do it well. You can't, they have limited budgets probably. What are some of the things that you feel like, as especially as a multi-language speaker, what do you think people are struggling with to get right, especially as they start this process of trying to translate and localize their content for these other language audiences?
yeah. I think from what I've seen, people often, at least I did, and other people I spoke to from other countries did as well. Um, I did struggle with writing concisely when translating for the first time. Well, when writing content, for example, in English for the first time. When I started developing content for the Zendesk Academy in English for its global audience, I found myself creating wordy sentences by thinking in Italian first. So what I was doing was thinking in Italian, writing in English, and that created like all these very long sentences. And working with native speakers taught me to write more concisely. Also, then I learned to be aware of cultural references and acronyms, especially working with Americans. So many acronyms everywhere, and those may not be universally understood. So for me, it was a learning moment from them and a teaching moment to them, because then we could both learn from this experience. For example, American colleagues, sometimes I found them using baseball analogies or other analogies that I wasn't familiar with. So I guess it's best to keep language neutral and concise, which helps in creating effective multilingual content.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, some sports tend to kind of cross across the globe, but even then, sports references are very common. At least as an American English native speaker, I'm not a football player. I've never played American football, yet somehow those references still have kind of found their way in like conversations. Or I will make it's a home run. And that's a very American baseball kind of reference. So I that's interesting to think about, though, that how you have to do that. So are there things that you find maybe along with the sports references and maybe the acronyms that get missed or don't translate well beyond that you're like, gosh, if you could just teach everybody to not do those things, it would make everyone's life easier? Or maybe it's not
Yeah.
that simple.
Yeah, I think other issues, things that get missed, can be like include idioms, idiomatic expressions, or humor, cultural references. For example, like all these elements often have meanings that don't directly translate or have equivalents in other languages. Um, and cultural references, yes, is a big challenge, I think. For example, when I was working at Zendesk, I once presented a story in Italy that referenced British jet set personalities I'm familiar to Italians. And to make the presentation relatable, we replaced an English soccer player mentioned with a well-known Italian soccer player, maintaining the narrative's intent. So I mean, this really it's about the importance of adapting content for cultural relevance. And I don't know if you just noticed what I just did here. I said soccer because I'm talking to you. So that you don't ask me, hey, Roberto, you just said football. You mean American football or European football? So I said soccer, so you understand. But I
Well,
wouldn't use the same word if I was talking to Europeans.
yeah, well, absolutely. Well, I would have appreciated a good football, as in soccer reference, though. Try to be culturally aware at least. This is, I mean, this is all very fascinating to me, and obviously, it's probably very easy to make a mistake, right? Like to miss something, or like you just don't realize because you're in your cultural bubble, and if you haven't been maybe out of that or haven't had dealings with a lot of people, maybe from like me dealing with you being from Italy, there's probably things I just don't understand culturally about Italy, having not been there, having not studied. But all this, like, easy to miss, also feels like overwhelming in some ways, that it's a lot and it could be expensive. It feels like it could be maybe hard to do. So how do you suggest, as especially, and I'm thinking about even this individual video creator, right, trying to reach another language market, how do you find that balance, though, in whatever content you're making and making sure it's good across? Are there things that we can like proactively do besides maybe just avoiding some things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think in everything else, it's really keep it simple and start small, right? When in the end, it's like anything else, like balancing cost and effectiveness. Also, in multilingual video production requires some strategic planning. So when I was at Zendesk, I led the localization project for the academy, and we analyzed where our content was most popular, and they identified 4 languages to start with. So where French, German, Brazilian, Portuguese, and Japanese. And so we started translating by translating the text in those languages. And as for the video, we didn't go like full translation, full localization. We just used the caption subtitles. So we started with this. We kept the English audio and provide the subtitles in those languages. And so the next goal, would be like to see some numbers. Like the assumption there was that probably if there are already many people in Brazil, say in Brazil, using a lot of consuming a lot of our content in English, then we assume that if we provide at least the caption subtitles in their language, those numbers go up. At Personio, we do differently. We create videos with audio in both English and German, in these two languages for now, because we have many German-speaking customers, and we will explore more languages gradually. But again, like you don't have to start with, okay, let's localize in 10 languages and let's do full localization with the actors and videos. So it's about starting small. Obviously, now we have the AI tools that are making localization more cost effective. So I see in the future, like this is an opportunity for even for companies with lower budget to really take care about their customers worldwide, being aware of their cultural difference in the different language.
Yeah, so I love that. Like this is there's scalable solutions, right? You don't have to have a voice actor come in and dub. And of course, you could get one voice actor for 3 or 4 people in your company, obviously. I mean, it's good enough for Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and
exactly.
Sylvester Stallone. We could make some cuts there, but no. But I love that approach, right? Like start small, see what works. Then if you see that you have the kind of the mass of people, you can adjust. So let's be a little bit more practical here. I think there's lots that goes into this process. We obviously in one podcast we can't cover all the details of all the things that you need to do, but are there some like things that we can do that are pretty easy, like just be aware of to help make sure that people are prepared, like especially across maybe different languages? Are there different needs, right? Like, are there anything that come to mind for those?
Yeah, I'd say it's important to design your content with flexibility in mind and involve native speakers of the target language as well. For example, I'm learning, like since I work at Personio and I said we have many customers in German-speaking countries, I learned something new. So I learned that translating from English into, or even Italian, from Italian into German usually results in longer sentences. And I mean, like sometimes very long, much longer. So we learned this while working at the Voyager Academy at Personio. We designed these flip cards for knowledge checks. The English text fit perfectly, but after translation into German, the text didn't fit anymore. And instead of altering the flip card size, which it's something we were not happy to do, we decided to prioritize concise writing, ensuring the content stays within that space constraint once translated. And I mean, in the end, if you think about it, keeping content concise is an effective optimization exercise and an instructional design best practice. So that I found that beneficial. And I also find it beneficial to avoid embedding text into images so that we can easily edit it for different languages. So it's about, I think, approaching things in a sustainable way. So knowing that, especially in the SaaS industry, like, or whenever you need to edit content often, you approach things so that you support sustainable production and editing over time.
Yeah, I love it. So, Roberto, we're getting close to our time here, just we want to get into our speed round, but I'm curious, what haven't I asked about localization? Because I feel like there's so much to hear. There's that we could potentially paths that we could go down and explore. But is there something that you would say from your perspective that kind of based on all the things we've talked about, what have I missed that maybe would be critical, important to add to the conversation that you would think would add value here?
I think in something that maybe I wouldn't stress enough, like really try to understand your audience. Like depending on what you want to do and the message you want to communicate, um, really involve native speakers and try to understand all these nuances in the language, because ultimately what you don't want to do certainly is to lose the essence of your message in the localization process. I have an example here that just came to my mind.
Yeah.
Do you remember this? Is an old movie from this comic book, Kick-Ass. Do you remember? Kick-Ass is well, it's American comic movie from some uh, comics from John Romita Jr. I think he drew this. Anyway, it was this movie, and it was clearly for adults with its very violent and gory, some gory scenes. Sometimes I get curious, like I watched the original movie and then I watched it again, or I watched some parts in Italian. I'm curious, like how did they change things, if they change anything. And in the Italian cinemas, this movie had a much lower rating, like around 14 years old, but this was definitely like 18 plus. And I discovered that they had significantly toned down the language, which felt like censorship to me. Like there was this girl, she was very violent and talking and swearing, and in Italian, like it sounded like a movie for kids. So this kind of localization takes away the essence of the product. So you don't want to do something like that.
Yeah. Well, what a great example, right? The kind of see those changes, and I also kind of wonder, boy, this feels kind of like maybe I'm trying to cop out of like, oh, if I only do a little bit, but I also feel like a little bit of effort in these circumstances go a long way. I know when I've traveled internationally, those few brief moments of like there was some English that would help me understand context, circumstances, always felt like a breath of fresh air, even if it wasn't everything that I needed maybe to, kind of figure out what I needed to do or whatever. But I'm assuming that's true for like doing a little bit, even if that's all you can do, is better than not doing anything. Would you say that's
Of
true?
course. Yeah, I think that's true. Um, I know, for example, like I know that if you come to Italy and maybe you may find people speaking English, so you would be okay with it. But even if you would say no, few words in Italian like ciao, buongiorno, I mean, you would see a smile on people's faces because they would appreciate your effort.
Absolutely. Well, Roberto, this has been amazing conversation. Thank you for so much for chatting with me. But it's now time we move into our speed round questions, where we're going to ask some quick questions determined by the roll of the dice. So let's go ahead and play that stinger, and we'll be there in a second. All right, this is international dice that we're playing here. So 12-sided dice rolling right now. The first question is question number 3. Ooh, what's a piece of advice you wish you could give a younger version of yourself? If you could go back and say, like, Roberto, here's some advice you need to understand: buy Bitcoin, whatever it might be. What is it?
I would do that. Yeah.
What would you tell yourself?
And also, like, other than the Bitcoin thing, I would say don't compare your success to other people's success. Like everyone has their own values, priorities in life. So what I learned is this. What I would say to my younger self is this: like, don't chase, like crazy things because you see on TV you saw some successful guy that is, doing some crazy life. Just follow your metrics.
Yeah, I love that. I've often heard the quote, "Comparison is the thief of joy." Right? Like,
Oh,
compare
That
yourself,
makes
it
sense.
gets tough. So, all right, let's roll dice again. Here we go. And that is at the dots at the bottom. So it's a 6. That's a very popular number with this die. Maybe it's the dice is weighted wrong, but it is. Share a piece of advice you've received that has had a lasting impact on you. So what's something somebody's told you that you've kind of stuck with you and has helped you out along the way?
I think this is actually something I kept hearing from my American managers, and it made sense to me. It makes sense to me, and I use it a lot, like progress over perfection, right? So this advice has helped me focus on continuous improvement, iteration, rather than getting stuck trying to make everything perfect.
Yeah, it's a dangerous place to try to be living in that perfection. So I love that
Yeah.
advice. Thank you. All right, last die roll. Here we go. Number 3. And it's question number 9. So we got what, 3, 6, and 9. That's kind of a nice,
Mhm.
nice setup. What's one thing that you're the most proud of in your career?
I think um, also according to other people I spoke to and my friends, I think that moving abroad at 32, when I was 32 years old, it's something that many people see as crazy, because many would say, "Come on, you're not a kid anymore. You're not so young anymore." And without knowing the place, I never been in Ireland before. Never been there. Without knowing anyone, didn't know anyone. But from there, like, I built a new career in all these multinational companies from scratch. It wasn't easy. Also, I had a loss in my family just shortly after moved, so that was not the best time of my life, but I managed and I went through, and I'm satisfied with everything I've done since. So yeah, I'm proud of that.
Yeah, well, I think it's awesome, and it's obviously it's working well for you. I mean, brought us together, so I'm so grateful for that. Roberto, as we wrap up the show here, if people wanted to reach out, connect with you, maybe learn from you, where should they find you?
Usual channels, but LinkedIn is is the social media where I'm most active. So feel free to reach out to me there.
Perfect. And as we like to wrap up the show every single time, we're going to ask you, Roberto, what is your final take?
My final take, yeah, just be conservative of other people, other cultures. If you want to do business with them, be respectful in that way, but without overthinking and you know uh, thinking that it's too costly. Like, can be done. Start small.
Love it. Great advice to start small. And Roberto, we want to thank you for joining me here in the Visual Lounge.
Thank you so much.
You bet. All right, everybody, that's Roberto. Wow, so many great things to think about from a language perspective, right? Thinking about how you can actually impact users across the globe is an amazing thing. And it doesn't have to be the big complicated thing. Obviously, there's lots of parts and pieces that you do need to consider, but start small, do little things, test, iterate. And I think Roberto said it at one point in there that was really great. Think about your audience. Think about what they need. Think about what's going to help them. Think about what you would want if you were in their circumstances. So great advice. Applies to video, applies to images, applies to documentation, all these kind of different areas of communication, which is fantastic. And of course, we hope that you're learning here along with us here at the Visual Lounge. If you got feedback for us, let us know. You can email us at thevisuallounge@techsmith.com. Make sure you reach out to us if you got questions or guests you want to see, or just want to tell us that you like the show or something you don't like about the show. We're here for it. So with that said, though, we hope you take a little time to level up every single day. Thanks, everybody.